Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today I'm looking at a first submission by Jannette and her horse Holly. The first thing I'd like to say to you is, just seeing that picture of you standing there starting that, I would like you to be careful about that rope. Putting a rope over your shoulder is really not what you want to do. And even leading the horse out, you never want to drag a horse out along behind you the way you just did there, because I know, you think you know this horse, but any horse can run you down, and you want to lead a horse. It should accompany you alongside its shoulder. That is, you should be walking alongside the shoulders as you lead the horse out there. And if you need to, if the horse won't walk along with you, then you need to take a whip in your outside hand, a buggy whip or a dressage whip even will do if you have long enough arms, and just reach behind you and keep the horse stepping up. So you tap him with the whip behind you so it steps up alongside your shoulder, because that's where you're safe. And also putting that big heavy rope over your shoulder like that and near your neck, should something go wrong, and you're not the first person I've seen do this, you just can't count on any horse being safe 100% of the time. And a big horse like this, there was a terrible, terrible accident that happened in Los Angeles where some people tied a student to a horse so that she could lead it, because she had difficulty with her arms, and the horse drugged the person to death. And it was a 27-year-old horse. So you just never want to have ropes around you like that, especially not near your neck, because you never know. I mean, a plane could fall out of the sky or whatever, a lightning strike out of nowhere or whatever, and the horse could bolt, and here's this rope over your shoulder near your neck. So at least you'd get maybe a bad neck burn, but at worst case to worst, it could end up wrapping around you. And believe me, I've seen many horses, people wrapped up in lunge lines and draw reins and side reins and everything you can think of, and getting themselves into trouble with. So, you never want to do that. So keep the rope coiled in your hand. Now, which brings up the next subject is, I'd like you to go back and watch our video again on lunging. Even if you don't, now this horse seems to get going pretty nicely and actually does pretty well for what it is, which is a heavy type horse. And you're getting it going pretty nicely and it's stretching it at contact. But the kind of rope that you're using there is so heavy that you can't get contact with the horse. So ultimately you want to use lunging like riding. And the way you're going about it here with this big heavy rope in just a halter, you're never going to be able to get a feel for the horse's mouth as you do this. So I highly recommend that you watch the videos on our website about lunging. Now, I do like the fact that at least you're standing up. I see a lot of the people who do a lot of the things that you're doing, and they have this idea about leaning over forward and some other strange things that, you never want to put your body in a position. If you lean over forward while you're lunging, what do you think happens if the horse takes off? It'll pull you right off of your feet. So posture has a lot to do also with how the horse responds to you in the lunge, which you're doing quite well. I mean, at least you're standing up straight. As I said, you're not doing this funny leaning forward thing that I see people doing. And you're keeping the horse, once you got the horse out there, you're keeping the horse pretty nicely in front of the whip there, and that's good. You're using all that correctly. So what I'm suggesting here is that you just get a lighter rope, and that you start lunging the horse off of the bridle or off of a cavesson, and so that you can begin to put side reins on the horse down the road. So the horse will develop contact with the bridle. Remember, part of what lunging is all about is getting a horse used to the contact with the bridle. That is, I mean, we never want to get on a horse until it has accepted contact with the bit. So that is, even accepted a bit in its mouth. So you're kind of wasting time here in that we'd like to see the bit in the horse's mouth, and developing some contact with some side reins. Of course, very long. Watch our videos and see how it's done. They're never tight. They're never forcing the horse into a frame. But it gives the horse some contact and gets your horse used to allowing that contact with its mouth, and gets the mouth quiet and stretching into the contact that is what we ultimately need. So other than that, your lunging here is pretty good. I mean, you're keeping the horse for what this horse is, and you say she's had some stifle problems. And a lot of these big horses have a lot of joint problems and things like that. I've worked with a lot of these horses. I was an avid fox hunter for many years myself, and trained many fox horses for people, fox hunting horses for people, and quite a few of these big sort of heavy crosses and this sort of things. And every horse is what it is. You can't expect this horse is not going to move like a much lighter kind of horse. It isn't bad from what I see here. But once again, you see, as soon as you start trotting, the head comes up in the air, and the horse is basically dragging itself along by its front legs is all that's happening here, and the back end is not really engaged. So if you've had stifle problems, even more importantly, that you want to get the horse stretching over its back, because the stifle going wrong is just a symptom that the machinery inside the animal is not working correctly, and that's what you kind of see here. What's really happening is this horse is just jabbing its front feet in the ground and pulling itself forward with its shoulders there. You know, you can see how U-necked it is underneath there. Even though it has a big neck, look at which part of it is being used, which is the underside at the moment. And you see how the hind leg just kind of, if you look closely, you can see that it just kind of looks like it's just not really doing much. The hind legs are just kind of being drug along behind it. You know, so once again, you see how heavy that rope is, and it's just such a big loop in it. You want to get something that you want to keep an unbroken line to the horse when you're lunging, and these kind of big heavy ropes don't allow you to do that. So really recommend, once again, you go back and take a look at our video on lunging and get your gear straightened out here, and that will help you a great deal. This type of lunging, when just a halter, it will certainly, you know, you can do a little bit of work with it, and some horses will stretch down, and this horse does pretty good. I mean, it starts to stretch a little bit as it goes along there. The process would just be a lot better if you had a correctly fitted bridle and side reins on the horse, so the horse can develop contact with the bit, and it would encourage the horse to stretch forward and down. But with a horse like this, you can't ask them to do too much. I mean, they're big, heavy horses, and, you know, we never want to force a horse to move. That is, you know, if you're having to beat the horse every stride to get it to move or something, you know, as it is with some of these larger horses, it's just not very productive. You know, as William Steinkraus said, you know, if you can't get the horse to like what you're doing and enjoying it, you know, you don't have much chance of succeeding much with horses. So that's kind of the idea. If we force them to do anything at all, it's going to become tense, or there's going to be a problem. Or horses, usually, if they don't want to move, there's usually a reason for it. And for instance, like a big, heavy horse like this, you know, you know, they're not prone to movement so much, as they say. And remember that draft horses were horses that were intended to work at the walk. Most of their work was done at the walk, not at the trot. You know, they were used for pulling plows and carriages and wagons and things like that. And very rarely would they trot. You know, that is the heavy type Percherons and things like this kind of breeds. Whereas opposed to there are bigger horses, for instance, like the Friesians and things as carriage horses and those sort of things. And you would see a horse like that trotting more. But these Percheron crosses, you know, the Percheron itself was a workhorse, was a field horse, you know, farm implement, so to speak. And, you know, it did most of its work in the walk. So they weren't bred to do trotting work and cantering work. I mean, they can do it, certainly, but it's a lot of work for them because, you know, they're a big, bulky mass, you know, like a big person, you know, like the guy in the football team who's not very fast, but he's the guy that blocks everybody else. You know, they're kind of like blockers, so they don't move very quickly. So take that into consideration, you know, and when you're choosing horses to buy for riding horses, that's something that you want to consider. Now, a lot of people, a lot of men or bigger people would buy these kind of, you know, Percheron crosses for their temperament, and also the fact that they were big enough, or so they thought, to carry them around. But that's really not always true. The problem is with the big, heavy horses, you know, most of them were actually not built for riding horses. So, you know, they tend to be kind of long in the back, and even though they're big, their own body weight is so bulky that it pulls their back down. So, and they were bred for kind of pulling with the shoulders. If you think about how a horse plows, it basically pulls, it leans into the plow and digs in with its shoulders and pulls forward. So we just have to be conscious of these kind of things when we talk about different types of horses and what they're going to be capable of doing. So I think the way you're going about this in terms of the speed at which you're going about it is about right for this horse. I mean, it's starting to move, but because you have no side reins or bit on the horse, the other horse is pulling to the outside all the time. You know, you're not able to get anything happening here that's consistent. You know, it's kind of, she takes a couple of good steps and then it slows back down again, a couple of good steps, and then she looks to the outside. So by getting you in a lighter type rein, though that's a good stretch there, that's starting to happen. She does have some moments. The pole thing is good. You know, it's not the be-all, end-all, but if you can get the horse to keep a rhythm over it is the important thing. The first couple times she went over, she kind of stumbled over it. But once again, with these kind of horses, you know, they're heavy. They don't like to pick their feet up much. You know, they're kind of used to going in heavy footing. Once again, think what they were bred for. You know, and even though this one is a cross, it looks like it has a great deal of the heavier type horse in it. But I do like how it's stretching down there. And as for speed, you know, for this horse, that's not bad. That's not a bad walk for this. You're getting the horse to move out pretty well. You know, once again, you see how slow the horse went. So just like when we ride, you know, we must realize that the rhythm guides us in many ways, because the rhythm tells us whether the horse, the exercise that we're performing with the horse, is having a gymnastic quality for the horse or not. So if it loses rhythm, in other words, it's not really doing the horse any good. So if you can't maintain a steady rhythm over it, it might slow down the first couple of times, but if it starts doing that every time and you really can't get a nice swinging rhythm over the pole, it's not really going to do you any good. Now that was much better though. That's quite nice there. And once again, the speed at which you're going for this size and weight of horse, and especially with the soundness problems that you've told me about, that is having stifle problems, this is quite good. And of course, understand that the better you get the mechanics inside the horse to work, the better all of those stifle problems and things like that are going to be. I've worked with many horses with stifle problems, and most of them that I've worked in the past, many of them have, by working them correctly, just worked out of that stifle problem and it disappeared. We can also see, while this horse is quite a bulky horse, I'm going to look here as it comes around behind the saddle. That is behind the saddle there. You see that there's a little bit of dip in the horse's back. So that tells you that the horse's back is pulling down. That is the weight of this horse, and that is also what's problem. We see a lot of these Percherons and Percheron crosses that end up quite sway-backed, because even though they are quite broad in all this, that doesn't mean that they can hold it up. So it's even more important that they stay fit, so that the bulk of their own body doesn't drag their weight down, which is, for instance, what happens, to a lot of brood mares, that don't get enough exercise. As you see how that constant weight being added to their bodies of raising foals, drags them down and down and down. However, just like a human, if you have a mare and you want to have a foal out of it, and you do, and then you can just start it right back to work. And if you do that, and get the horse fit each time before you, for instance, if you were going to breed it again, would be very helpful in the horse's longevity, so to speak. Because it's like a person, when you see a sway-backed horse, it's like a person with a hunchback or something that, it's a real loss of mobility and a loss of balance, and a total loss of that ability to connect its two ends, which is hard for us to understand since we all only have one end, so to speak. But for a horse, it's kind of like the back end can just be something that gets drug along behind, and that's what often happens with these kind of big horses, and with a lot of horses in general. So once again, see how she's looking to the outside. He's looking to the outside. You want to just, now I did see you bring him around there, but once again, you have such a big long loop in this line because it's so heavy that you really, it's kind of like you are responding behind the time. If that big loop weren't in the rein, you'd be able to correct the horse sooner, so to speak. Now, you are doing that. You are correcting, and I see it happening, but it would just be a lot more consistent if you had a lighter line, just a nylon, or I like the cotton web ones are very good because they're very light, but they're not heavy like this giant rope that you have here, which can be very difficult, and once again, easy to get tangled up in yourself. I know a lot of women have trouble even carrying the lunge whips, much less carrying the size of rope that you've got there. You seem to be handling it okay, but look at how much slack is in it all the time while you're lunging. So we want to try to get that slack out so we can keep a more consistent contact. Once again, get the bridle on the horse and get it into some side range, not short, long side range. Watch the video and see how I explain that. We never want to try to force the horse into any kind of frame with side range. They just get connected long so the horse has something to gather contact with. But as you see here, once again, now this horse, when you do trot, it's trying to stretch a little bit, and you're getting some moments that are really good, like when it gets down to there. I just think this would come, once again, look how counterflex she is looking to the outside there as you come around, which is also what makes it difficult for you to maintain any kind of rhythm in the horse. So that would all just be a lot easier, and you get your circles more consistent, and then you can start getting the horse more consistently. Remember, once again, lunging should be preliminary. It's just like riding from the ground. If you do it correctly, you're moving the horse into the outside rein. For instance, when you have side reins correctly adjusted, when the horse is stretching and starts to bend, you'll see that the inside side rein will be looser than the outside. That's one of the things we tell people all the time. If anybody ever tells you to tighten the inside side rein so that to make the horse bend, it has just the opposite effect. It will make the horse hang on the inside rein. When you get the horse to come up and swing through its back, it will be able to bend, and then you'll find that the inside side rein will be slack, or more slack than the outside one. So once again, it's just like riding. The whip is our leg, when we're lunging, and the rein is our rein. But as I said, the rein you have, imagine if you put those on the horses while you were trying to ride and tried to ride with them on. It would be next to impossible. Well, you'll just get a lot more out of it, out of your lunging work if you change that. But you are getting some good things going here. A lot of what I'm seeing is good and appropriate for the horse and for what you told me that you're just starting the horse back. The horse has had stifle problems. So what I'm seeing here is really very good. We just need to get in that frame and stay there consistently. You get a couple of good steps and then it kind of all falls apart again. That's very normal too, but I think you'll find if you got this horse into some side reins and if the horse isn't used to contact with the bridle, then just lunging him off of a cavesson, but with a bit in the horse's mouth with a side rein so that it can develop correct contact. But once again, this is not bad what you're doing here. I mean, you're getting this horse, it's starting to stretch into the contact, you know, it's starting to stretch, that is. There's nothing for it to contact. That kind of being my point. But this is not bad at all. You're getting a pretty good rhythm here in the walk. It could just all be improved slightly. But good stretch in the neck there. But once again, we just need to get a little more actively. But you can't push a horse like this too much. So, you know your horse, and just try to get it to maintain the same rhythm, that being the most important thing. And that can be really hard in the walk. That's why, you know, people think the walk is easy. It's actually one of the harder gaits to ride, if not the hardest gait to ride well, because everything is not happening very fast, but it's going very slowly, so it's hard to feel impulsion. So good work there, and let's go on and see some riding. Now, once again, when I see you ride by there, once again, notice how this horse has a big hole behind the saddle, how the back dips downward behind the saddle. That's from lack of back development. So, and once again, same thing in the flanks. You see how the belly of the horse kind of hangs down a little bit. You know, as he gets stronger, you know, correct dressage is like Pilates for people. It's core strengthening. So it's not just the back. The abdominal muscle wall has to lift up in conjunction with lifting the back. It all works together. So that's what we want to see happen. And once again, not bad. You know, looks like you've got just a loose ring snaffle on there. Good. I like that walk right there. That's quite nice. It just needs to be a little bit more active. This sort of horse seems to, it sort of throws its head down a bit, and then it almost moves less behind. So try to activate it and keep trying to get a little more walk out of the horse as you can. As I said, I know you're just starting this horse back, but what you're doing here is not bad at all. And I think this is quite nice. And, you know, the horse I think should come around pretty nicely for you. And just know that it should help the stifle situation. You know, the more you get the horse to work mechanically correctly, that is over its back, the stifle problem may disappear entirely for you, as I have seen it do in the past. On the other hand, I've also seen ones that ended up having to have the operation. So I would say about 50-50 in my experience. But it's certainly going to help everything else, you know, even if you do end up, you know, having to do a little more work there. But it sounds like you're on the right track with the supplements that you're taking, and it's improving. And I think if you take your time here, you may find it's all okay. So same thing here in your riding. I'd just like to see you take the slack out of the rein a little bit. I'd like to see the horse a little more active. I don't want to see you trying to pull the horse into any kind of a frame. I just wanted to keep the slack out of the rein so that the horse can develop contact that is a soft feel with your hands. But once again, just keep trying to activate the horse, get it to swing a little more actively in the walk. And I would keep this horse on very big circles and straight lines. I mean, I wouldn't even begin to start any kind of lateral work for the most part with this horse, especially telling me that she has stifle problems. And so you just you know, maybe a simple little leg yield, little step to the side here and there, but keep it as simple as that. Because being the size of this horse, and it's, you know, being the kind of horse that it is, it's quite straight behind, which makes it hard for it to cross its legs over. So that's why it's even more important, because a horse really can't step over in a leg yield or shoulder in correctly unless its back is up anyway. But if you take a heavy horse like this that's a little straight behind and start trying to do those exercises, they'll end up hitting their legs together, which is something that we want to avoid all the time. There you go. That's good. I like that stretch there. I like how you give to him when she does. Once again, just needs to be a little more active. But, you know, you say you're just starting this horse back, so I think this is pretty darn good. You know, and resist the temptation. Someone else wrote to me the other day and talking about all the things they were doing with their horses, and one of them was, you know, a horse they were barely beginning to try to do the same sort of level of stuff that you are. And, oh, now I'm going to take them out on hills and these sort of things. Well, let me dispel the myth of taking horses on hills. Hills are good for horses if the horses are working over their backs. If they're not working over their backs, it's terrible for them because it even puts more pressure on their joints. And, you know, it will build up their shoulders, but we don't want them. We want them to go up a hill just like they do anything else, working over their back so that they can stay balanced. You know, it's beautiful. Have you ever seen going up and down hills? You know, when you watch the really good European jumper riders, you know, come down the big bank jumps, you know, where they have to almost slide down, you'll see that they stay forward, whereas the bad riders on the hollow horses all lean back, and they usually lose control and can't jump the fence at the bottom of the fence. So once again, that's all good. So good walk here for what you got with this horse. It's a good place to start. You know, those are the biggest things I would change is just how you're going about that lunging. Get your gear a little better there, and looks like you have a bridle anyway, so just if the horse is soft in the bridle, I imagine you can probably just lunge it off of the bit without any problem. If not, just put a capison on it, or even, even if you use your halter there, is perfectly fine too, over the top of the bridle, if you want to do it that way. So like you'd be using it like a capison. It's the same principle. Those Western halters are the same principle. They're just putting, they have the knots on them, which give the horse a little bit of a smartening up, so to speak. It's the same thing as what a capison does, which is just a correct English capison, for instance, just puts pressure on the nose a little bit there when you need to discipline a little bit rather than the mouth, because we never want to try to discipline the mouth of the horse until the horse has accepted contact. We don't want to really discipline the mouth at all. We just want to maintain contact with it. But we do have to soften it from time to time, but we don't even want to try that until the horse is comfortable with the bit in the mouth, which this horse obviously seems to be. So I see no reason why you wouldn't just go back and start lunging correctly now with the horse and see if that will help you get a little further with what you're doing. But you're having some good steps of walk. I like everything that I'm seeing here. For the most part, except for see how she just loses the bend. I'd like to see you keeping the bend and working for that, obviously working for that stretch and maintaining it and keeping it consistent is what I'm looking for. I might suggest that maybe you just stay on one big circle for a while and try to keep the circle the same size until you really can just get the horse all the way around the circle consistently and make that a big circle, like as big as you can put in this area that you're working in here, because very often people today have nothing but dressage arenas, and the dressage arena is a very small place to ride a horse in, especially the big kind of horses that we have today. They need a little more space and they don't need to be making turns so often. So I would suggest that with this one. You want to be on the biggest circle you can make there that makes the horse comfortable in the walk. But that walk is looking good there. But I really like what you're doing, and you have a pretty decent position there. Your hands look like they're quite soft, and this horse looks quite amenable to what you're doing, so that's all good. If anything, I'd say to you, just a little bit round-shouldered at times, just stretch up that upper body. Just always remember that we're trying to stretch ourselves up in the air so we don't put so much pressure down into the saddle. People over-pressurize their saddles. We have to hold ourselves up and stretch up so that we sort of support our own weight a little bit more. But this walk is coming pretty good. I mean, for what you've told me about this horse, I think you have a good start here. I think you can improve it with just the few things that I have suggested. And I'd love to see you again sometime in the not-too-distant future. So big circles, try to keep the horse bending, keep the rhythm, try to keep the stretch consistent. So work for that consistency as much as you can, and go back, and that will start in the lunge line. When you start using your side reins and things correctly, that'll all help you get the horse just a little more consistent in the work that you're doing. So really good work. I think you're on the right track. It looks like a lovely horse. Once again, don't push it too hard because it is a big, heavy horse. So you're right to be just walking and a little trotting on the lunge line. You're right on track for what a horse like this ought to be doing that hasn't been in work, and you're just coming back. It looks quite cold there in Chicago. I have fox hunted there many times. I've shown there many times. So I know what the weather can be like there. And but it looks like you have a beautiful place there, beautiful farm. Hope you haven't had too much snow this winter. So I look forward to seeing another submission by you very soon. This has been Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Hope that helps. If you have any questions, please just email them on along, and I'll try to make clarifications for anything that I may have said in this video. Or if you'd like to have a Skype session with me, you can do that as well when we can talk in person about what I see here. All right, thank you very much.